Hello, my name is Justin, and I am a recovering perfectionist of 20 some years. Sometimes still blindsided, somewhere between thoughts and feelings. Um, but being in recovery, that means there may have been times where I have slipped back, and but I can testify that the occasions are much farther and fewer between, and less intense and less enduring per moment. But that doesn't mean that the tendency still doesn't have to be managed. That area of the garden of my heart has to be gardened a little more intently and more frequently than some of the other areas that I have a natural inclination towards being better at, I guess you could say. You know, sometimes some of us who have post-perfectionism syndrome, we have the propensity, as we're seeking to come to deeper places of operating by grace through faith and not by works, and so that our obedience and call to holiness is being responded to from gratitude in grace and not a position of earning or trying to maintain that grace. Um, when we are working and putting subconscious or conscious pressure on ourselves, um, well, in those moments of failure, in those moments of, and it doesn't even have to be sin. It could be just any one of our standards failing. There's, or not just failure or sin, but rejection, um, or just, or missing an opportunity or hurting someone, just whatever it may be. An accelerated emotional reaction with anxiety stirs up and wells up within in those moments, and we either want to quickly fix or try to hit redo, even though we can't go back in time, or we just get overwhelmed with the burden and the feeling of defeat or loss or failure. And it can be very hard, this post-perfectionism syndrome of anxiety and intensity and riding good highs when we're on a good streak, so to speak, doing well. Um, and it's interesting because this is something that occurs separately from an initial cognitive realization of what just happened. This is something that hits us, maybe even kind of, it blindsides us sometimes when it's very intense, and it can really knock us down. I mean, really, um, especially when we've undergone trauma or other things. And I don't say that word lightly, because sometimes what we call trauma, um, sometimes, well, we just have to be careful with not just blindly labeling everything trauma. Um, but there is very much very real, severe and serious trauma that people have undergone, abandonment and severe rejection or abuse, or physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all kinds of types of traumatic experiences, including our own self, doing things to ourselves, or severe failures can be traumatic, have a traumatic effect on us. But dealing with post-perfectionism syndrome, and the way this hits us when we fail, or when we have something that triggers some type of severe anxiety or pressure, or emotional response that throws us off, sometimes for days or weeks, kind of reminds me of dealing with, well, at least for my own life, dealing with things that I've been addicted to, like different types of idols in my life. And you know, having an addiction to things that I really want or that I had and or felt bad when I didn't get, and just really, put my stock in those things. Um, and and dealing with the withdrawal of giving up those idols, um, especially when some of them come right back in my face in different ways. And but of course, this is still different. But there's something similar spiritually involved here. And the fact is that um, there's an emotional attachment that has to be released, because an idol is something that we love and want so much that we'll sacrifice things of other importance or value for. Obviously, God is supposed to be our ultimate idol, so to speak, our ultimate God, our sole God. Well, perfectionism in its own way can be, well, it operates and kind of is an idol in its own way, because we're idolizing our own ability to be perfect and to measure up to our own standards, to God's standards, to someone else's standards, or whatever it may be. We are putting ourselves above God's grace, above God's empowerment for us to be holy, and his righteousness that he gave us, because our righteousness, as the Bible says, is as filthy as rags. And that doesn't mean a grease rag or from the shop or from cleaning a dirty restroom or working on a car. Okay, um, so to be whatever our perfectionism is, whether we're um, having, I don't know, being a people pleaser or being codependent or like I said, doing everything right and perfect and to the T, or being hyper organized, or, you know, um, the fact is that we're going to have to be careful, because there's one thing to be healed and to embrace and experience and encounter God's grace, but it's another thing to be whole, to where that healed place of the heart and soul is built back up to strength and durability to be able to handle um, when we encounter failure, or when we encounter things that come our way, or that we walk right into, or any combination thereof. Um, we're going to have to find a way to continue to pursue surrender, just like we did to begin with, in those areas of perfectionism, and experiencing and receiving, learning to receive his grace, because it's his grace that empowers us to not only to be obedient and to be holy and to live, but also it enables us to not be overrun and driven into the ground like a drill when we do fail, or when life or people fail us on any level. And so I want to encourage you, go back to surrender every day, even in that particular area, and in just in general. The foot of the cross every day, every morning, and abide there with him, and go back to it. Don't not just us visiting there once or twice and like, oh boy, I finally received grace in this area, and then just to go. No, we keep doing what brought us there, to that healing or that forgiveness or that grace or that touch of freedom in the first place. Keep going back to that same way, that same place. It's surrender every day. And whatever you have laid down, your own grip or control of your own life or destiny, or your works, or your the way you operate, or the things you do, or the things you're responsible for, or your obedience to God, or holiness, or purity, or whatever else, whatever it is, inside and out, relationships, people, allow that to be released, that control to be released from your hands, and allow yourself to grieve the loss of it. Like, feel the loss. It's okay. Feel it leaving. Feel it releasing from your control, your kids, your marriage, your home, your ministry, anything, your calling, anything that is precious to you, that you've been vice gripping, or your own abilities and your gifts, and again, your own ability to obey or to do things well and right, or your high standards. That doesn't mean you're losing or lowering your standards. I'm talking about the control, the vice grip you have on yourself on those things, in those areas. And as crazy as it sounds, releasing them is actually reminding us, and we can see at a certain point that we never really had them as much as we thought we did in the first place. We never really had as much control as we thought we did, or been trying to have, or all along. Because life can be so frail. Anything could easily change, and we begin to see, whoa, hold on a second. A whole different set of circumstances, or one wrench in the system, or something changed, or whatever, and we're not near as together as we thought we were. We didn't have near as much control over our life or things, or ourselves, as we thought. It truly is actually God holding all things together, far more than we realize. And then, in those places of true surrender and trusting Him with those things, so it's not just freely letting them go randomly, but putting them in much better hands that are vested in our life than our own, then our hands are more freed up to relish in just new places of surrender and intimacy with Him, and holding and clutching onto Him and His heart, and loyalty unto Him, and intimacy with Him, and seeing more, how does He feel? What is His heart beating for, breaking for, rejoicing over, frustrated over? What is His thoughts? What does He want today? How does He feel today? And the more we cultivate this posture of just in this practice of just deepened surrender to Him, and exchange our burdens for His, this is the place of transformation, of revolution. This is the place of healing and restoration, and building the strength of our spirit and soul in Him, and not in and of ourselves. So I pray that something that is shared here, that we're talking about here, has such a light upon it, such an illumination of God's grace and insight in His word upon it, that it can be a revolutionary change in our heart and our understanding of walking with God, and what it truly is to be relational with Him and not just transactional.